Good evening, Cherries fans, and welcome to this latest episode of Cherry Picking. Now, before I introduce my regulars here, here's a little bit about our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. To find out what they can do for you, visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk. So you'll recognise him by now. He has got the biggest collection of Bournemouth shirts that you'll ever see in this town. It is Mr. Matthew Harrison. How you doing, mate?
Not bad. Got another one out today. Look, another classic.
I don't think we've seen that one on here, have we?
No. And
Do you know what?
Fits as well.
Here's a task for everybody. I think what we should do is go through every single video that Matt's in and establish how many Bournemouth shirts he has got or worn so far. And I think maybe you should pick a different one each time. Just a random different one, mate.
I tend to try and do that.
Do you? You already know which ones you've worn. Honestly, you must have over 100, to be fair.
I tell you what. Let everybody have a guess. They can put in the comments, can't they? How many shirts they reckon I've got.
Good shout. Yep.
I'll give you the answer next week.
There we are. Matt will count his shirts. It might take him a bit of time. I think I've probably got about 25 or so. So you got a lot more than me, a lot more special edition ones. And of course,
Matt, by any chance, yeah, sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's Craig. All right, no problem. I was going to introduce you, but you carry on, Manny.
No. First of all, let me apologise for that. That was rather rude. I was actually about to ask Matt, by any chance, you wouldn't happen to have the shirt that George Best wore when he was at the club, do you?
I'll right. Yes and no. Yes and no. I'll show you why.
Interesting answer.
I'll show you why in a bit.
Interesting answer.
I'll show you why.
Well, there we go. We'll when are you going to actually reveal this, Matt?
Well, when you bring up one of the slides, I'll head off and have a rummage.
All right, mate. Yeah, no problem at all. We shall see what is going to crop up. But of course, we do have our expert opinion. In Manny, how you doing, Manny? All good?
All good, Mr. Beasley, Mr. Harrison. Good to see you, gentlemen. And once again, apologies for that abrupt turn of speech.
Mate, honestly, don't worry. It's cool.
Looking forward to. Yeah, but I really don't like being a bad guest on someone else's channel. It's not really nice of me. So, but anyway, the week's been going good. Just enjoying the football, enjoying my new gym routine. Work's going as usual. So, all in all, can't really complain.
Awesome stuff. And yeah, that's where I'm going to be headed after we finish today, to the gym. I have been working out as well. the guns are coming on, aren't they?
To the bar at the gym, more like.
Beautiful,
Oh.
mate. Beautiful.
Yeah,
If
the
if
bar.
if you're with a certain Mr. Baxter, it'd probably be straight to the bar, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, it's always with a certain Mr. Baxter. He's always about the silver fox. But we're all in a good mood because, of course, we did beat Liverpool. We had our free for all. Things are looking rosy. The people that have been critical of Gary O'Neill have all gone a bit quiet of late, and I think Gary is starting to convince people. And there was something that come out. Should we really think? Should we really be critical of Gary O'Neill now at all? Because was this part of the plan? Was he just hampered by injuries? Has he solved the issues that so many were disgruntled about?
Yeah, it's definitely a food for thought for a lot of people now, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, he had a good win at the weekend, and he's had some good performances lately. So it's now just a case of, like we were saying in the free for all, it's a case of continuing to build on this, isn't it? Really.
Yep, it certainly is. Manny, what do you make of Gary O'Neill's work and what he's done since? Well, since really that Burnley game. That Burnley game was where things had fallen off a cliff, hadn't they? Really, and we were at our lowest. But
Yeah.
he's getting things right now.
He is, and I think you take forget about the Liverpool game for a minute. Obviously, you can't forget about it per se because that was a terrific result, and you boys deserved that. But there were several moments since then where you could see the performances were starting to improve, but you just weren't getting results that you needed, and that's just part of life as a Premier League manager, especially if you're managing a team which is quite low in the table and trying to reach the safety point of maybe the middle of the lower half of the table, or at the very least just avoiding relegation. You're in for a scrap, and whatever good fortune you can get, you should take it immediately. But you will have some moments of bad fortune, and I will say that the Arsenal game was really the game for me, which really showed me that you had turned a corner in a way. Because seriously, for the first hour or so of that game, I thought the Cherries were quite brilliant in the way they dominated Arsenal for the most part. Arsenal, obviously, to their credit, did come back furiously after that first goal, but I thought you contained them quite well. It was the Arsenal game that really showed me that you were willing to, stick to a plan, and you played quite well, and you really caught us cold and were the better team for the best part of. The way it ended was an absolute choker. But I guess the biggest fear, Craig, if I'm honest with you, is that many of the cases when teams in this position will look for these types of performances as a means of, according to some cynics, clutching at straws, saying we're putting in the performances, but we're just not getting the results, and we're doing everything we possibly can. The problem is football is a results business, but it's clear to see really that the galvanizing effect that Gary has had ever since taking the job from Scott Parker is quite clear to see. And of course, for a time being, you were threatening to crack the top half of the table. You were on a magnificent run. Everything was coming up cherries, pun intended. And then it was just a case of one unfortunate result, and everything started to fall a little bit. But credit to you. I mean, you picked yourselves up. You're recovering well, and of course, West Ham just sneaked that draw as well, and they ended up putting you back to the relegation zone. But you still look in a deep position. I only hope that Gary will tell his players not to be easily disheartened, but just to carry on. And I'm reminded of what Alex Ferguson told his boys in the first Premier League season during the month of April, which is normally the month when everything comes to its conclusion, and May just provides the the afterword, if you will. He told his men, "We've suffered so much pain for so long as a club. This
Yeah.
month, I just want you to go out and enjoy yourselves. If you're able to win these last few games and make sure that you do as well as you can, as far as I'm concerned, you'll be champions." And as it happened, Aston Villa at the time, who were managed by the ex-United boss Ron Atkinson, were in contention for the league, but ended up slipping up at the worst possible time near the end of the season, and United went on to become champions. Now, I do not wish to be accused of disrespecting United by mentioning them and Bournemouth in the same sentence, but the sentiment remains the same. The players need to just go out with the same level of belief and just enjoy playing their football. And if they can do that, I'm sure they will definitely get the results the way they play.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, because it's looking promising. It is looking really, really promising. And of course, one of the team that you mentioned there, Aston Villa, is our next opponents. A side who is managed by Unai Emery now, and of course, earlier in the season was under the stewardship of Steven Gerrard. Gerrard, of course, did quite well at Rangers, but it just didn't work for him at Villa, did it?
No, it started well when he replaced Dean Smith, and obviously he was getting the team to perform quite a bit better then. But then, for some reason, at the start of this season, things really fell into a bit of a funk, and the team just never recovered. I keep saying that the way he handled the Tyrone Mings issue, stripping him of the captaincy in such a public manner, was absolutely disgraceful, because when he was a Liverpool player, mind you, under Houllier, at that time, it was the Finnish international Sami Hyrpiö who was captain. But at that time, Gerard Houllier made the decision to take the captaincy away from Sami because he was having some issues with his form, I think, at the time, and give it to Gerard, who obviously grew up in the area, was a local boy, came through the youth, the academy and the youth teams, was as Liverpoolian as they come, and it seemed to be a masterstroke at the time. But because of Hyrpiö's stature within the club, he was given a great deal of respect by the manager. I'd like to think. And so knowing how he felt to be in a similar situation, for him to do that to Tyrone Mings was just disgraceful. I know Mings wasn't exactly performing too well, and he had his own issues. But to make a public show of that was it just wasn't going to do anything to try and foster any sort of team spirit. And clearly, there was a sort of a funk in the team with many of the players not quite being in form, and it was reflected in the results. So he had to leave because obviously the way he was going about things and the way the team wasn't getting results, his position at the club was untenable. And the club made a masterstroke in getting Unai Emery, who in fact managed my lot too. And I actually rated Emery. I knew from his pedigree that his value would be best in joining these you could call them sleeping giants or maybe middle of the road teams, and getting them to punch above their weight. A multiple Europa League winner. His most recent triumph, in fact, came with the Yellow Submarine of Villarreal in Spain. They beat Arsenal in the semi-finals, memorably, mind you, and went on to beat Manchester United in the final. So he clearly has a set tactical plan. He clearly is a manager who likes to study his players and try and, see which players can perform according to his system and try and give them some more opportunities. And that's sort of how it goes with him. And when he came in, obviously the players knew that they had a manager who they could respect. They knew they had a manager who had seen it and done it, won the trophies, got the T-shirt and all of that. And the results have improved, and they're no longer in a relegation dogfight. They are almost effectively confirmed to be safe from relegation unless they suffer a huge slump in form, which will not be likely. And they seem to have recovered very well. And especially given that Aston played Bournemouth early in the season and lost at Dean Court, I think that team and this team now will be very, very different. And you might find that out when you head over to Villa Park.
Well, of course, Aston Villa and Bournemouth, and we've got quite a good record against them. We'll leave that for after, but we have shared quite a few players as well, haven't we, Matt?
There's been quite a few over the years. Yeah.
So, this is our collection of players who have played for both clubs. By all means, in the comments, if you remember any more, do let us know. But I'm sure we have covered off the main men. So, the first one, of course, Tommy Elphick. He is back at Dean Court and an absolute legend. Of course, helped captain our side into the Premier League in the first place. Firstly, Matt, what did you make? Well, to be honest, it's pretty much self-explanatory, really. But what did you make of Tommy's time at the club and his time then at Villa?
Yeah, I mean, when he first joined us, you could just see he was a natural leader. Obviously, Eddie come in and made him captain, didn't he?
Yeah.
Took the armband off of Miles Addison, I think, who was captain at the time when Eddie come back. But yeah, leader, good, strong defender, and you knew with Tommy, you know, alongside Steve Cook, you had a good defence there. Wasn't too bad in front of goal either. Remember him scored a header against Chelsea. Numerous other times. But as soon as he left Bournemouth, which I thought was a bit sad. I could understand why Eddie did move him on when he did, but you know, quite sad to see him leave. And then I think he sort of was kind of plagued a little bit by injuries, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And at Villa, I think he signed for Steve Bruce, didn't he? And then another manager come in after Brucey, was it? Is that right? I might be right, I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Ended up being out of favour, having a few loan moves, and so yeah. But it's great to have him back at the club now.
Yeah,
He's a
definitely.
massive asset to Gary O'Neill. It's obviously coming back from the youth ranks, isn't he? Alongside Sean Cooper.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see some old faces in the management team.
Wasn't he at Huddersfield at one point as well?
Yeah, that's where he finished his career.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where he finished his career. But like I said, I think the injuries just got the better of him in the end, unfortunately. I mean, he's only 35 at the minute. So he's a young coach, and you know, hopefully he's got a good career in football coaching, or maybe possibly one day management ahead of him. So,
Of course.
yeah.
And the two clubs he was on loan at, you know, he was quite correct. Both in 2018 were Reading. He only played 4 games for Reading, and then he did go on loan. I think he was recalled by Villa from Reading because for some reason, and then he went to Hull City for the remainder of that year. And before moving to Huddersfield. So, yeah, it was a shame really how it all ended for Tommy, and you know, it was a legend at the club. I think really when it all started to unfold and when he lost his place was because of that injury, wasn't it? Against
Yeah.
it was right at the start of the season, wasn't it? Wasn't it? It was a game we won. Was it West Ham? Was it West Ham? Yeah, it was West Ham, wasn't it?
All I can remember is I think he started the season with the niggle, and it kind of progressed on and got worse. I can't
Yeah,
remember exactly when it was, but I think he was carrying the injury for quite a while, and he was trying to avoid going under the knife, I think.
he
But
wasn't long in. He wasn't long
no,
into the season. So
no.
yeah, I think it was against West Ham, if I'm right in thinking. But yeah, an absolute legend, of course, back with the club. And I think that, you know, paved the way for Sylvain Distin to play as many games as he did. Let's have a look at the second player. And there we are, another man that we recognise. Who wants to go for it with
Yes.
Tyrone?
Yeah, let Manny go with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm seeing him play for Villa a lot, and obviously, he is. I think this is another success of Unai Emery. The fact he was able to, you know, speak to Tyrone Mings and tell him that he's still very much a part of the plans plans at the Villa and sort of enabled him to get better. And obviously, at the beginning of the season, he was rather inconsistent, but he's sort of improved his form and become more of a mainstay in the Aston Villa back four. Of course, now with Diego Carlos having recovered from his injury, there could be a selection conundrum. Would it be Mings and Carlos, or maybe Konsa and Carlos, or Mings and Konsa? Ezri Konsa might be the one to make way. And I think just taking a look at Mings's career, he's just turned 30. In fact, his 30th birthday was 3 days ago. So, Tyrone, happy birthday from all of us here at Up the Cherries in all departments. Still not forgotten at Bournemouth by any means. And it's up to him whether he can try and kick on. And he's also, of course, as you all know, been capped by England 17 times. I think these upcoming 2 years are going to be key for Tyrone and how he will sort of build from this and try and, cement his reputation as a more than decent defender. The only issue is, of course, that when it comes to England, centre-backs have been a dime a dozen. Either that, or it's usually been the old guard who've been picked for major tournaments over the years. So Mings clearly has a little bit more to try and work on. He was, of course, a part of the Euro 2020 squad, which which reached the final, of course, only to lose to Italy on penalties. I don't think he played very much during the tournament, but he still has a chance to develop himself well and really try and kick on. And it will be nice for him to have a reunion with his old club. And the reason why I say it, of course, is because this is going to be a bit of a test to see how far the team have come, but also how far he's come in terms of recovering from the disappointment earlier on in the season. And I think he has improved his play. Still capable of a very, very occasional, very rare, lapse in concentration. But other than that, he's a more than decent defender. And if Harry Maguire and John Stones need some rest, then he's had some decent backups. If he has a strong finish to the season, I don't see why he can't force his way back into Southgate's plans.
So, of course, Tyrone Mings is a player that not everybody really likes. He was great for us. He was really, really loyal, lovely guy to speak to. But, of course, there was that incident with Zlatan Ibrahimovic, which, of course, yes. Yeah. What's your view of that? I think that's always going to follow him around, unfortunately.
I mean, I remember at the time thinking not many people would stand up to Zoltan like that. Fair play to him. Obviously, what he did was a little bit naughty. But, I mean, I think that's a case of you live and learn. I don't think he's been like that since, has he really? Player. I always rated him. And it's a shame he got hampered by injuries at Bournemouth. Because obviously on his debut, I think he actually came off the bench against Leicester, and I think he lasted about 13 minutes and did his crucial ligaments in his knee, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was hampered with injuries. And then obviously they brought Nathan Ake in. You had, the experience in Frano and Cookie ahead of him. So, but I mean, I always thought he was a good player. I personally would like to have seen him stay at Bournemouth.
Yeah, completely agree. And believe it or not, there was another incident where it was classed as an accidental stamp on Nelson Oliveira, who was a Portuguese international in an Aston Villa game in the Championship as well. So that was going back to 2019, believe it or not. Do you think, I know this sounds bad, but do you think there was any intention with regards to the Ibrahimovic incident?
Yeah, I'm actually reading an interview from The Guardian right now, and the headline says, "It was an accident. There was no way I meant to stamp on Zlatan." Now, I think the thing about some of these incidents, Craig, is that a lot of these players can probably, give the impression that they're innocent all along. But cheekily, if they can sort of get away with it, they can sort of do something with the idea that the camera isn't really looking at them. And that used to be common quite back in the day. But now, of course, with the cameras on you, players have to be a little bit smarter, I think. And the reason why I say this is because I'm still going to have to be honest with you, look back at that incident again on YouTube and make my own judgment, because I didn't really remember watching much of Mings as a Cherry, to be honest, but obviously for Aston Villa he's been really consistently playing as such, and he was of course given a 5-match ban for violent conduct, but let's put things into perspective. Obviously he was much younger then, and I think if we take a look at that particular incident when it happened, the one with Oliveira, for instance, when was this? This was
2019.
In 2019. So probably not. Yeah. So this was, of course, when he was with Villa. So I think perhaps in his favour, maybe those incidents were spaced a little bit further apart. And I guess some of these players sort of have an idea that, football being a contact sport, sometimes you've got to, take a few risks like this. But reading about this, it certainly doesn't make for good reading, appearing to stand on Oliveira's face as they jostled for possession during their goal at the Medeski Stadium. And I think Oliveira was playing for Reading at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that time he'd actually gone to Villa on loan from Bournemouth. So there's a lot of it's wonderfully tying together. I love how you've chosen to do a cherry picking episode on this, and I think obviously when it comes to events like this, I don't think any player is going to flat out agree that he meant to do that. And I suppose when you're trying to fight for the ball, and you have to try to do whatever you have to do, sometimes these things can happen. The injury certainly looks horrible watching again, and all I can say is that I'm really not too sure what Tyrone Mings was thinking, but I suppose maybe we could give him the benefit of that by saying that he genuinely wanted to try and get the ball, and it was just unfortunate that he ended up stamping on his face. I think maybe he didn't really see that Oliveira's on the ground. Again, I am really going to have to watch both of those incidents, and then maybe we can talk about it another day. Maybe during the free-for-all show, if I can see the match, we can talk a little bit more about Mings' performance and then hark back to these incidents. But in any case, I think he's matured a bit. He obviously knows he can't play that certain way, and he's grown as a defender. I think almost every central defender will have started off being a little bit of a bad lad, but will have grown and evolved and matured a little bit, and become a little bit wiser. So he might not be liked by too many people, but as long as he puts his head into his game and just focuses on improving himself as a player, I don't think anyone can really criticize him too much.
No, fair enough. And to be perfectly honest, from those incidents, I honestly don't think he meant either of those. I think maybe he was just very young and very passionate about the game, and unfortunately it happened on two separate occasions. But knowing Tyrone and speaking to him several times, I'm sure that there was no intention there. But it's always a point for debate, let's say. Let's have a look at the next person, and of course he's somebody who's been on the channel, hasn't he?
Mr. Sean Teal.
Yes, Mr. Sean Teal. He's a really, really nice guy. Of course, he's a builder now, isn't he?
Yeah, he certainly is. And you wouldn't want to mess with him either.
No, most definitely. Not a fan of Harry, but
not a fan of Harry.
Go on. Give us your memories of Sean Teal. I remember the very, very late part of his career at Aston Villa, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I don't really remember much about when he was at Bournemouth because I mean, that was late 80s, early 90s. I mean, I
Yeah.
started going when I was about 4 or 5 years old, sort of 90, 91 was when my dad started taking me. So I don't really remember much of him as a player, in all honesty. But from what my old man says, was that he was a hell of a defender,
Yeah.
and strikers didn't used to like playing against him. And like he said, you could always see he would move on to bigger and better things. Obviously represented Weymouth as well, so he was quite well known down on the local scene here. But yeah, from what I'm told, if you're a striker, you wouldn't want him defending against you.
He was tough. He was tough. That's my
What I like,
memories.
what I like to think is he's a good old fashioned classic defender.
Yeah.
The
That.
old sort of like Jack Charlton mold. Do you know what I mean? Where
Mhm.
you got proper stuck in. I mean,
Exactly.
I'd like to see how many cards he'd pick up in the modern day game.
He'd be in the book every single week,
People think
probably.
Lerma used to get booked a lot. Well, I reckon Mr. Steele would probably beat Lerma if he was playing modern day football.
Yeah, and well, let's be honest, Vinnie Jones, not that he's Bournemouth or Villa, but Vinnie Jones would probably be sent off the pitch every single match. He'd be
Yes.
suspended more than he played, really. But that was what was great about old school football, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Let's have a look at
Yeah.
our
I mean,
next.
I do actually have a few vague memories of him. He was actually a part of that Villa team under Atkinson, who of course challenged United to the all the way to the first Premiership title in
Yes.
that first
Yeah.
season, 92 and 93. And I think, if memory serves me right, among his teammates included the likes of Dalian Atkinson, Steve Staunton, and a few others. So he was a big
Yeah.
part of that team. And the team at that time, also with Mark Bosnich in goal, was certainly looking to be one of the teams that would consistently challenge for top honours. And he did win a League Cup with them, and the team also were sort of up there or thereabouts. I don't think they were just quite able to really kick on in terms of really, really challenging for the league, but he certainly made his mark there at the Villa, and I do remember seeing him play on the telly, if not live. He was a decent defender, more than decent.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's have a look at the next man, and a man who has recently left Aston Villa.
Yes, yes.
Wish he'd
Danny
made more than
Ings.
30 appearances for us.
He was like I said before, I think we've had Danny pictures on here a few times before, haven't we? Like ex-England players when we did a feature before the World Cup and stuff
Yes.
like that. But like I've said before, when he was at Bournemouth and he sort of broke into the first team, you could tell he was gonna go far in the game.
Mhm.
If he had been more fortunate, at his time at Liverpool, he might have had a longer career there. But obviously, with the quality of players they had, and I think he had a few injuries there as well, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, it meant he moved on. But I mean, I think, to be honest, the majority of his clubs he's played for, apart from Bournemouth and Liverpool, have been claret and blue.
Yes. Yep. I
I think,
believe they have.
apart from Scunthorpe, I think he's represented every club in the country that wear claret and blue. Isn't he?
Yeah, well, every league club now, because of course Scunthorpe are
Oh, of
non-league.
course.
So
Yeah.
yeah, he was at Burnley. He followed, of course, Sir Eddie to Burnley. Unfortunately, Ingsy didn't come back. But of course, then played for Villa and is now playing for West Ham United. So hopefully he won't be scoring many goals between now and the end of the season, because if he gets his shooting boots on, it could be a bit dangerous for us, especially against us. Hopefully he doesn't find the target. Let's have a look at another player, Warren Aspinall. of course, quite a bit before my time, before your time, Matt. Any memories at all?
No. I remember when he played for Bournemouth.
Do you?
Yeah, he played for Bournemouth. It was the Great Escape season. Was the season he left? When Mel Mason.
97.
No, before then. 94-95 season.
Okay.
I think it was. Yes, 94-95 season. He was signed by Pulis the season before.
Hmm.
And he was, to be fair, a Pulis kind of player, I would say. Machin come in. I think he was injured at the time, and I don't think Mel Machin favoured him. I don't think.
Yeah.
He was. I mean, if you look at his career, he's got a fascinating career because he's been everywhere.
Mm.
You want to look at his clubs who he's represented. Well, I think he'd come to Bournemouth first on loan, and then he signed permanently. But yeah, didn't have the longest of careers at Bournemouth. But yeah, he's got a fascinating club record when you go through see all the clubs he represented.
That's a
yeah,
vintage Villa shirt, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's late 80s there.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I didn't even realise he played for Villa until I started looking into this the other day. So it was quite a surprise for me. But yeah, after his football career, I think if I'm not mistaken, he had a little bit of a downfall in his personal life, I think. But he was last to be known working for the BBC as a summariser. So, yeah, like I say, I can't remember, too much about him not being on the field for Bournemouth. But it was very interesting to discover that he played for Villa anyway.
Well, there we go.
I'd like to know. I'd like to know if Manny knows this one.
No, I mean, listen, I never really got to see this gentleman play, and obviously, when I started watching football, he wasn't really on my radar as such. I think he was obviously the best years of his career were with Portsmouth, who weren't in the first division at the time, and after that, of course, obviously he went on to play for Bournemouth and Swansea City, and then other clubs. So I never really got to see much of him or really know much of him. So sadly, no memories of him. But he also was old school, and I think listening to what you're saying, Matt, obviously he had a bit of a terrible patch after the end of his career, but he was able to, overcome that and come out the other side. And I think he still is with the BBC, of course, BBC Sussex as a summariser, as you've said. So an example of how, a person can, go through a terrible phase, then come out the other side feeling happier. Absolutely. It's another reminder of just of how important it is to make sure that we treat the issue of substance addiction and mental illness very seriously indeed. So I'm glad he's recovered. I'm glad he's happy. And if I could see a few video archives of him, I'm sure I would have been quite impressed by him as a football and his career. So no memories of him, but I'm sure there'll be plenty to look over.
Yep, definitely. Absolutely. And the last one, there we are. We all recognise him.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Very good artist. Very good artist, Very good artist. Very artistic.
Yeah,
person. He does a lot of painting, I believe.
But yeah, he wasn't a bad goalkeeper, was he? Really, in his day?
No.
He could have been better. He was a little bit erratic at times, but he certainly had more of his moments. And obviously, people recognise him from his days at Aston Villa and at Liverpool and Aston Villa. Went on to play for some other clubs, and I think Portsmouth was where he enjoyed some really, really fine seasons. And then, of course, he also played for Bournemouth a bit, and that was the season. And of course, he ended his career in the Indian Super League, where he was player manager of one of the teams. So I think he's also had. Yeah, Kerala Blasters. Yes,
Oh,
Kerala
sorry, thank
Blasters.
you.
Uh, and that was the first season when they were bringing all of these ex-players, ex-internationals to come and grace the league and try and provide a level of, some promotion and awareness and sort of get people really hooked onto the league. And he wasn't bad in his role as a player and coach of the team, and he played almost all their games as they went to the final, only to lose to a last-minute winner. Very heartbreaking, but so almost typical. And he was definitely a character. And later on, obviously, he had some financial issues, but I think he's
Mhm.
also overcome them in a way. But my goodness, he used to smoke a lot back in the day, but thankfully he quit. And
Yeah.
yeah. So as long as he's a little bit calmed down and mellowed down, that's okay. And over 50 caps for England, a few major tournaments, ended his international
Mhm.
career in South Africa at the World Cup. Not too bad, not too bad at all.
No, definitely, definitely. Well, we have got quite a good record against Aston Villa, haven't we, Matt?
Yeah, definitely within recent years we have, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and
I think the last 2 times I've been to Villa Park, we've won.
mm,
So, yeah, so not got a bad record at all.
before we go on to that, though,
Mhm.
we might as well mention, of course, a player who it did look like was going to Aston Villa. In Arnaut Danjuma, there was rumours out there. He did play under Unai Emery.
Oh,
Of course, there was still the Everton thing. Then, of course, he ended up at Spurs. But let's bring this in, and this is a big point because do you think we will see him on Saturday? This man.
ah. Um, this is one of those situations, isn't it, that you don't want to see a decent player that play for you ends up being in. Obviously, we were surprised to see him out the side on Saturday.
Yeah.
But it's one of those, isn't it? I don't think he's too happy with the contract or contracts that have been
Hmm.
put in front of him. I, from what I read in some of the press today, it's saying that he doesn't think that the contract showing his full, like what he's fully worth. So, yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of clubs sniffing around. And are you surprised? I'm not really, to be fair.
No.
Newcastle, West Ham, Leeds have been mentioned. Even Saturday's opponents have been mentioned.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, and obviously he is out of contract.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the headlines what I saw today was Magpies facing Fraser repeat on Jordan Zemura. Um, so I mean, it's not going to be. I don't think the situation will be anything quite like.
Oh no, he hasn't refused to play, has he?
No,
That's the thing.
I think Gary's made a brave, well, not a brave decision, but I would say a right decision that if the player doesn't look like he's going to be signing, in some respects, you have got a plan without him. Obviously, we got a left back on loan from Roma.
Yeah.
Lord Kelly played there on Saturday and put in a really good performance. So, or is this trying to make him sign the contract? I mean, who knows? But what's going on behind closed doors? But there's a lot of talk in the press over the last few days
Mhm.
about his future.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully, I think he's a quality player. I want him to stay. And I think you know if he does go, I think it's going to leave a hole. Although if we stay up, I guess it's a case that we will probably sign Vina because he does look good. Let's be honest, Vina does look good.
Yeah, he does look good. I mean, Zamora. I really favour the guy. I like him, and I
I
think
do.
maybe further on in his career, I don't know what Manny might think, because with what maybe Manny's seen of the player. But I think personally, he's the type of player that we could possibly push more forward. As more of a winger type player. Something maybe similar to what Spurs did with Gareth Bale. There's potential in the player as a real attacking force. I mean, you love seeing those runs he makes into the box.
Yeah.
So I think he's a real threat going forward. So it wouldn't surprise me if eventually he turns out to become a winger more than a left back, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, I would love him to sign the contract. I thought the other week with Anthony signing his, I thought it won't be long now before they announce Zemura. Because obviously they're really good friends. They have a good partnership on the left when they play together. So I mean, in an ideal situation, and what I'm hoping for is that the player signs. But obviously that's down between him, his agent, the club, whoever else is involved. And whatever other contracts teams offer him.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's a cracking player.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a shame Jane Anthony and Jordan Zemura do link up very well. I thought that they would pretty much follow each other's careers round, because that's, they seem to be that close. It just seemed to be, a really, really good bond between two players, which, is rare in this day and age. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll all be sorted. Shall we have a look at this week's opponents then? And of course, it's the last opponents until, believe it or not, the start of April, which sounds crazy seeing as it's only the 15th of March.
Oh
So,
yeah, the lovely international break.
And it always comes at the worst possible time, doesn't it? Because, of course, we're on a decent run, playing well, and then the international break turns up. But let's hope we can get 3 points against Aston Villa. But over the years, so let's start off with when we weren't here. Of course, in the third division, which is a long time. To be honest, it's crazy to think Aston Villa were in the third division, which of course is League One now, Division Two. But yeah, they were still enormous back then, weren't they? But we beat them at home, but then lost at Villa Park. I'm guessing that was probably their only season in the third division. Because the next,
if you go back there,
yep,
you're missing one of the most famous goals. You see Mr. McDougall there, that diving header.
Yes,
that was actually featured on Match of the Day in the 70s.
And it was a third division game.
And it was a third division game.
You wouldn't have it nowadays like that, would you? But it's quite an amazing statistic, really, isn't it?
They don't even like talking about Bournemouth when they're in the Premier League, let alone if they're in the third division.
I know. It was quite funny. We didn't have any pundits on this weekend because of what had happened, but we were first for the first time in ages.
Yeah.
I think the last time was when Liverpool did beat us 9-0.
Please. Anyway, sorry, you can carry on now, Craig.
Right, let's go to the 1980s and recognise some people there. We most definitely do. There is Luther and there is David Platt. But again, 1987, and Villa were in League Division 2, of course, what is now the Championship.
Yeah,
John, talk us through it.
It's a bit funny for Villa, isn't it? Because they obviously had dropped back down. They'd won the European Cup, hadn't they, in the early 80s, hadn't they?
Yeah, I think they had.
I think Mr. Manny will correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they did win the European Cup. I think it was 1980, in fact, that they won it.
Right, okay. And then I think they had a cup final appearance as well around that time as well, didn't they? I think. But they
Mhm.
seem to have dropped down a league. They around the time they played us,
I
Mr.
stand
Pat
corrected. It was 80. It was 82 when they won. It was 82 when they won it.
when they won it, and then within
82.
5 years they were playing in the old Division Two. They, I believe, because my dad was at this home game, the Bournemouth home game, where they lost, and I think it was some massive bumper crowd Dean Court had that night. I can't remember the exact attendance, but apparently it was a packed to the rafters. And they had obviously a young David Platt. They had a young Martin Keown. That's Martin Keown there at the bottom, sporting a beautiful
Mhm.
80s hairdo. Um, and a legend at the club, Nigel Spink, in goal.
Yes.
So they had some. He went on to play for Millwall later, I believe. And obviously we had some heroes. You know, you got obviously Luther, like you mentioned, and Paul
Mhm.
Morrell and John Williams and Mr. O'Driscoll.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a 15-year gap between playing each other in the league.
And then, of course, we go into the 1990s, and that gap got even bigger. Whilst Villa were winning trophies, we were largely on our backsides. The Great Escape #1, Winter Gardens, of course, a cup final with Grimsby, but yeah, it was a completely different world, wasn't it, to what we experience nowadays?
Yeah, obviously it was quite an eventful decade for Bournemouth, obviously. And I think Villa as well. That I mean, Manny might know a bit more than me on this, but I know they obviously won the Coca-Cola Cup. I don't know if they had any period of time in Europe or exactly what they. I remember John Gregory coming in at some point and making them a bit of a force again, but
Mhm.
um, I don't know when exactly that was. But to be fair, I don't really remember much about Villa in the 90s, to be honest.
Yeah, Villa in the 90s, I can tell you, Matt, were obviously one of the teams that were looking to make a name for themselves as challengers for top honours. And as you mentioned, they did win those league cups. They also won an Intertoto Cup, which was sort of a backdoor tournament,
Yeah.
which would enable them to qualify for the UEFA Cup. And so they did have their moments in European football.
Mhm.
And obviously, when it comes to Gregory, um, yeah, he actually didn't do too badly with them. In fact, he was the manager uh, when they qualified, and they were Premiership leaders halfway through the 88-89 season, but then um, they ended up finishing sixth. And then the worst part about that was that you could see that after that fall, you could see that things were starting to go a little bit sour. And when things went sour, he obviously lost the respect of quite a few of the players. Of course, Stan Collymore will has a lot to say about him in his own autobiography. You can take what he says and writes in that book with a pinch of salt. Personally, Gregory had some promise as a manager, but I think it's fair to say that the Aston Villa gig was pretty much as good as it got for him because he was never quite able to really recreate those really good moments. I believe he moved to Derby County and QPR afterwards, didn't really have that much success. His last stint, as with David James, was also in the Indian Super League, this time with a different club called Chennai, which is the southern rival of David James's Kerala Blasters. And since then, he hasn't been in management. So
Right.
I think that was also a decent time for Villa, and I think you could see during that decade, Villa were trying their best to really, stay up there, continue to challenge, and continue to really punch above their weight. And certainly, the players they had at the time, even after losing Dwight York and I think Andy Cole to just Dwight York to Manchester United, they still were playing quite well and playing above themselves. And I think it was after that decade that things started to turn a little bit sour for them in a way.
Okay.
Well, let's have a look at the last slide, which of course is the modern day. And to be honest, apart from an FA Cup game and our first game ever in the Premier League, Aston Villa's a side that we quite like playing.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I still remember that first day, going to Dean Court and the first game in the Premier League, and feeling so excited that our little club had got to this league, and now you're playing Villa in the Premier League, and I can just remember that day. Like, it was a beautiful day, lovely hot day. I can remember it like it was yesterday. I think it's the first time I've ever been to Dean Court on the first game of the season, not been able to buy a new football shirt, because I think the football shirts were delivered late, so everybody was buying free training tops and
Yeah.
things like that, because there was some delay in the sponsorship deal, so the shirts hadn't arrived yet. Were only enough for like the squad. So yeah, real good memories of that day. Even though it was a defeat, it was real good memories of that day. But yeah, after that, like I said, I've been to Villa Park the last 2 times, and yeah, we seem to have a good. I suppose that we're their bogey team a little bit, I suppose, aren't we? And let's hope that continues, and we can get something out of the game on Saturday.
Yep, definitely. Well, hopefully we will do. And of course, it will be keeping up a good run of form. If we can get 3 points, we're up to 27 points then. And it's looking healthy. Are we still thinking that 36 points should do it?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, like I say, I'm sticking with what I was saying during our predictions last week. I think, if we can get those 4 wins, 5 wins, I think with the bonus win that we've had against Liverpool, there should be another 4 wins in there.
Yeah.
Which I think will give us 42 points, if that's the case.
Yes.
And I can't see us going down on 42 points. But it's a strange season, isn't it? It's so close. Everybody seems to be able to beat anybody. So it's going to be a difficult one. All we can do at the moment is just keep going out there.
Worry about ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, worry about ourselves. At the end of the day, we know the performances are getting better. The performances are there. The new additions to the squad settling in pretty well. Dongo, since he's come in, he's got the most assists in the Premier League since he signed. So that's obviously a massive positive. The defense is looking better and better. I don't know if you saw the clips that the club put out this week of Sensei's performance on Saturday.
Yeah.
In the ball, playing out from the back. So he's coming on really nicely. He's formed a good partnership with Stevens, which, like you've discussed before, Craig, you've said he's very much like in the Steve Cook mould. So, things are looking better defensively. So yeah, why can't we get something Saturday? Why can't we stay up now? It's looking a lot different than it did against, Crystal Palace, Brentford. I mean, I can take losing the game, don't get me wrong. If you lose to the side that's better than you, then fair play.
Yeah.
But the performances aren't there. That's the most disappointing thing for me. But now the performances are there. The lads are going out, they're trying, and yeah, Here's to 3 points Saturday.
Yes, yeah, and it will look a lot rosier going into this international break, and then of course we restart in April with the game at home to Fulham, which you could say it's a very winnable game, especially with Fulham in the form they are, which is why it's a bit gutting it isn't happening, sooner. That we've got this international break before we play them.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Well, hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be getting a victory at Villa Park. It'll be nice. We've got a good record against them, but we will have our opposition preview show. We will have our free for all. We will do some shows in that international break as well. But until the next show, firstly, thank you, Matt, for coming on the show. Oh, and there is something else actually that we need to mention, which is this.
There you go, Manny. Mr. Best.
Yeah. Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah, I remember reading his autobiography, Blessed, and I think he told me that the time he spent there was quite memorable. The stands were always packed. Everybody had to get their glimpse of the Belfast boy, even if he was coming to the end of his career. The thing about Bestie was that even as at the end of his career, his pace had sort of declined. You could still tell that he had a lot of skills. And I think the reason why I asked if you had the shirt, Matthew, was that maybe some older generations of fans who might have remembered going to the games would have possibly collected one of those shirts as a souvenir, might have handed it to you. But
I
yeah,
wish.
I mean, that's obviously a sight worth seeing. No question about it.
Well, I actually been rummaging around while you and Craig were talking while the slides were on, and I can't lay my hand on it, but I do have a retro replica of it. But I don't actually have an original. But and my one's got a sponsor on the front because one season they had a sponsor on it, the following season they didn't, or whichever way round it was. So mine actually has a local car firm on the retro one I've got. But yeah, that kind of brings me on to during the World Cup, during the international break, Craig.
Yes.
Might be a good idea. Now you're telling everybody how many shirts I've got, where it might be worth racking them all up together and doing like a special on the shirts. We can talk about shirt. I can talk about shirts all day.
Do you know what? We're going to do that. We're going to go through the entire collection of Matt's shirts. I can contribute my shirts as well into the mix of these photos. However, the problem is that all the shirts that I've got, Matt has probably already got anyway.
More than likely.
Yeah.
You never know.
You have-
combine them together, you could have a wonderful collection. I mean, shirt collections, boys, are all the rage right now. I think if you do an episode on that, it will be classic. Believe you me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Well, we're going to do that.
We will do a cherry picking special.
Yes.
During the international break, and we'll get. Well, no, we'll end up somewhere, and we'll have all my shirts railed out, and I'll reminisce about some memories of those shirts.
Well, we're going to definitely do that. But Matt, thank you again, mate, for coming on. We are looking forward to that one. And we will definitely do that show.
Don't forget our watch along on Saturday.
Yes, we will be having a watch along on Saturday for the Aston Villa game. So come and join us for that. So we've got the opposition preview show. We've also got the raw reaction, and of course we've got the watch along before that as well. So come and join in and make your comments. And Manny, thank you again, mate, for coming on. A pleasure as always.
The pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine. I'm just glad we survived my horrible internet issues to at least do this. And
That's all
I
right,
really
mate.
want to work out a time when hopefully this issue doesn't take place. I'm going to have to make some other arrangements. But anytime you call me for cherry picking, I've told you, it's a wonderful, relaxing thing. I really, really enjoy it. And I'm absolutely stoked that you're continuing this. Long may this continue. this is an absolute treat.
Definitely, definitely. Well, until the next show, guys, up the cherries, and we'll see you then.